We actually started developing the Career Impact Bond 2 years ago, like way before the onset of the pandemic, with an eye toward addressing the declining economic mobility that you mentioned, Jim, and at the same time, addressing the growing skills gap as the economy continues to shift and change. And then since the pandemic hit, economic inequality by any measure has just gotten that much worse. So Social Finance, we're an impact investing nonprofit. And when we built the Career Impact Bond, first and foremost, we had student outcomes, students like Brandon, their outcomes at the center of the arrangement. So we call them the KIB in Social Finance hallways, the acronym Career Impact Bond. And the KIB is essentially a student-centric, impact-first income share agreement that enables people like Brandon, who are underemployed, unemployed, often people of color, women, to acquire the skills they need to get jobs that are growing, that are in demand, and jobs that lend to career pathways with economic mobility. So Brandon talked about GA, and he talked about getting a job that doubled his salary, but how does it exactly work? So we start with like real-time labor market data to see where the jobs are. So Brandon's in Chicago, so we start with where these jobs are all over the country. We then target high growth industries like IT, high performing training providers like GA, and then we find the impact investors to cover a portion of the tuition costs and fund the important wraparound support services and the emergency aid that Brandon talked about, rent, to meet rent, transportation, childcare, anything. And these supports are actually crucial to our student population. And then the capital from the impact investors enable students like Brandon to enroll with no upfront costs. So they get enrolled, they get trained, they graduate, and then they get placed into jobs. And those who get good jobs, and importantly, those who keep these good jobs with salaries over a particular income threshold, they repay the program costs as a fixed portion of their income over the next few years. And those who don't get a job, or those who don't get a job that pay over that income threshold, they owe nothing. So essentially, the KIB is an impact-first financing tool with student-friendly terms and protections, with payment caps and fixed repayment terms with no extensions. And we have this thing called the Student Bill of Rights to really guide all the parties that are party to the arrangement. We see the ISA as simply another consumer finance option. So one could go to General Assembly, take out a loan, or enter into an ISA. But the Career Impact Bond is much more than that, is a tool to advance economic mobility, and it really is a holistic career-based approach to job training. So there are actually several key distinctions than a traditional ISA. So first is that the Career Impact Bond is specifically designed for people like Brandon, people from overlooked communities, often people of color. The second element is that the KIB includes critical wraparound support services that Brandon has talked a lot about. Basically, that it's not just financing the tuition, but also financing all the stuff that prevents people from completing and graduating, right? So we want people to be successful, and that means also funding those critical wraparound supports. Number three, the repayment terms of the KIB are cost effective and extremely student friendly, and we can get into the details. Fourth is that in order to make this happen, we need philanthropically motivated investors to enable this financing possible. And then finally, and very importantly, Jim, as you mentioned about incentives, everything is about incentives. There's great incentive alignment among all the parties, the investors, the training providers like GA, to make sure that everyone is focused on student success. Every Career Impact Bond is designed specifically for the types of occupation and the training provider's cost effectiveness. So in Brandon's example, the terms are 10% over 4 years if the student makes over $40,000. So at any given month, if the student is not making an annualized salary of over $40,000, the person owes nothing. There are also caps. So you're done after 4 years, regardless. There are no extension periods, which is quite a different feature than the traditional ISA market. And then once you hit 1.5x of payment cap, so around $22,500, because the General Assembly course is around $15,000, depending on the state that you're in, the graduate is also done. So those are the terms. And we believe that the alignment of incentives is really important. At the end of the day, the investors only get their money back if the students are successful, and Jake and General Assembly only gets made whole if the students are successful. This is massively different from the status quo of how we pay for financing, how we finance education and training, right? Because people like Brandon shoulder all the risk. It's like a one-sided risk equation. The individuals bear all the risk. They pay tuition and all kinds of fees. They take out student loans. They leave part-time jobs, full-time jobs to enable themselves to do so, regardless of whether their education pathways pans out and whether those pathways translate to career success and economic well-being. So this one-sided risk allocation is horrible for everyone. First and foremost, horrible for individuals, but they're also horrible for schools and training providers because they suffer from program attrition. And importantly, businesses are left with crucial job openings with no one to fill them. So the Career Impact Bond is trying to reallocate and rethink who should bear that risk, how we allocate that risk, and importantly, how we measure outcomes to make sure that the accountability equation is right the whole way through. It's just been an incredible time doing this work when the pandemic hit, and we have no choice but to build back better, right? So tens of millions of people have been displaced, and yes, some of them will go back to their old jobs, but most won't, and all of them are scared of their economic futures. But if you look at the labor market data, there's still right now over 5 million job openings across the country, and we're seeing sustained job openings in IT, in healthcare, and transportation services, and many of them with strong career pathways, right? Like IT, you'd be moving up from help desk support to network administrator, or pathways in healthcare, like, going from LPN to RN, licensed practical nurse, to registered nurse. So, how do we unlock this opportunity at scale so that, all the providers like General Assembly out there sees this as an opportunity to really expand their addressable universe and to serve more people by reallocating risk, by having different people pay for this, so that the worker at the end of the day is the most important beneficiary.